Hello, this is Danny Ryan, and welcome to the ThreeWill podcast. I'm here with Tommy. Tommy, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here, Danny.
Awesome. Thanks for getting together here on a weekly basis. It's nice to see your smiling face.
Sure. It's good to be here.
So we've had a couple of podcasts leading up to this topic that we're going to cover today, which is about the process that we use on doing migrations. I know we've been doing some complex migrations recently. It seems like just really trying to get our customers to get over onto Office 365 has been, one of the challenges that folks are seeing, and we're seeing a lot of projects related to this. For folks who might not know, we use Scrum, and Scrum is one of the agile processes that is out there. And there's some small modifications that we make just for the fact that we're dealing with an external client and working with a client. But for the most part, we're using the fundamentals of what Scrum is about. What we wanted to talk about today is maybe any of the modifications that we might make, or maybe even just pose the question, does Scrum work with what we're doing on these migration projects?
Well, first of all, Danny, thank you for the opportunity to geek out on process. I don't get this opportunity too often, and I don't believe you let me do this, but yes, we can geek out on
This
on
is
process.
a sign of true love, Tommy.
Yes.
I love you, my brother. I love you. I will sit here and listen up to you about process for the next, don't say 30 or 40 minutes. Maybe I'll give you 15 minutes.
Okay,
How about
15.
that?
Let's do
15.
15.
Okay, ready? Crank them up. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and go.
So yeah, the process as it relates to migrations, we really enjoyed using Scrum as our methodology for doing custom implementations and the work that we do with SharePoint. And as we've approached migrations, we've thought about, using Scrum, and should Scrum be the methodology that we use? And that's what we use today, and it's working for us. And I was taking some time recently to step back and think about, is that the right choice? Are we just forcing it down the path of Scrum because that's what we know and we're comfortable with? And so I kind of posed that question out to our Yammer group and had some really good feedback on that. And kind of the question came up, should we use Scrum? What are the options to evaluate it against? And I said, well, there's really any option. Is there something better than Scrum to do these migration projects? So when you see a migration, you automatically think about there are distinct phases when you approach a migration. Mm-hmm. You have a step, some kind of analysis type step, or people might call it envisioning of what is this scope of this migration. What's the bounds and what are we trying to accomplish as a part of this migration? And then that goes to another phase, which is a planning phase. Mm-hmm. Is, okay, this is our scope. Let's do the proper amount of planning to know how this is going to fit into the grand scheme of things. Because you can't just be willy-nilly about going after a migration. There's an organizational impact. And so it's not just planning for the work you're doing to make that migration occur, but how does this fit into the grand scheme of things, and how can we do this and minimize disruption to the organization?
Yeah, it seems like communication is just, and this is typically things that we might be working with our client, but ultimately our client's responsible for the communication that goes out to the people who are using, what you're migrating off of and onto.
Right. That's such a huge part of a successful migration, is the communications piece. And just like real estate, it's location, location, location. Migrations, it's communications, communications.
Good. Say it 3 times.
If you do not do that, you're destined to have a lot of pain in that process.
Mm-hmm. I know for a lot of like the Jive to SharePoint migrations that we've been doing, we do them like with the workshop up front, and then we have the project afterwards. So it sounds like sort of what we're doing is maybe those first 2 steps during the workshop, and then coming up with the plan afterwards, and then.
Yeah, when you look at those workshops, at the end of the day, it's helping an organization decide, should I do this, and what's the rough budget for going after this. So especially with the Jive to SharePoint migrations, it's, okay, I've got this in Jive, where does it go conceptually over into SharePoint? And what we do in those workshops is we're doing an inventory for them and an educational piece to let them know, what is involved in this, process of moving from Jive to SharePoint. So we come out of that and we've done some of the analysis piece, basically. Some of the planning, really, really rough side of the planning side. It's really enough planning to arrive at a budget so you can make an ROI decision and you can get a sense of, can I get this done in time? Because a lot of times our approach with these migrations is, okay, I've got a renewal, we're ready to move, and it's going to be financially advantageous to move by this date. And so our workshop allows them to understand, what are they going to do and how much is it going to cost. Yep. And then we really need to go through all those steps. They might be compressed after our workshop, but we're still doing a certain amount of detailed analysis and planning before we get into some of the more implementation steps.
And as you know, I find it refreshing that there's a deadline out there, because for a lot of typical collaboration types of projects that we're doing where there isn't a deadline to get something done by a certain period of time, it's sometimes tough to make a decision whether to do it or not to do it.
Right.
It's just nice to have something. And I fairly early on, when working with clients who want to do migrations, I start putting together an action plan around it, which is, saying we do this during this time, we do the workshop here, we do this next, we do, and sort of work our way backwards so that I almost want to, it's one of those things, like as a good project manager, want to give a sense of urgency at the right time. And if you don't sort of spell out, hey guys, if really it looks like, I know we need to move over in October of this year, but if you back things out, we need to get, a services agreement in place right now if we're going to make it.
Right.
So,
yeah, and when we're, doing those, we're estimating, certain things. One is the actual physical migration, and the other is what types of enhancements do we need to make as a part of that kind of generic process and tooling.
Yeah.
So what additional scripts or enhancements to the tool needs to take place? Do you have anything that's kind of needs to be custom built on the other end? Let's say, maybe you're using, for the case of Jive, you've got a landing page in Jive that has widgets and it's arranged in a certain way. Well, maybe we need to build that on the SharePoint side so we can give the user a similar experience when they show up at the new location when the previous location is shut down. So, when you look at those steps and, I said analysis and planning, what comes right after that is what we call, configure and develop. And that configure and develop is, okay, what do we need to configure in the tool and in the environments to run a migration? And then what do we need to develop to enhance the kind of out-of-the-box migration experience? And that might be from the tooling or the destination side to create some things custom to get a better adoption after this is migrated. And then we go into a pilot, and we go into an actual production migration, and then a stabilization transition to get that platform finalized so you can shut down the previous environment. With those phases, the way I look at it when I put my Scrum Hat on is I look at each of these phases.
You have a Scrum Hat? Wait a minute.
I do.
You have a Scrum Hat?
It's kind of messy, but it's...
Where is it? You keep that by your desk? Do you pull that out when somebody takes the wrong move?
Well, I wear a few hats around here. One is that Scrum Hat.
You wear so many hats, you don't have hair on your head. And neither do I, but that's not the reason. That's a whole other thing. But go ahead, sorry.
So, when you look at these phases, let me get back to my process, please. When you're looking at a phase, I can draw the analogy of that phase is like a release in Scrum. So when you have a release, within that release, you have sprints, and within that, you have your daily cycles. And what we look at is when we get into that phase of planning, or let's say it's the configure and develop phase, we have a budget set for that is enough budget to get the goal accomplished, but we want to accomplish that goal in the most optimized way possible.
Yeah.
So you go into that phase and you say, here's the 10 things that we know, the 10 stories that are inside of this phase, and we want to give the highest value during that period of time. So when we come up with other ideas, let's say, during that phase, then we can adapt to going after the better ideas. And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about Scrum is you're not committed to a story until you get into that sprint. So you're flexible enough to change your mind if you want to spend that money in a better way.
It all goes back to your manufacturing days, just in time, minimize rework. It just seems to be,
Right.
That's what you're ultimately trying to do is not creating a bunch of rework.
Right. But, with migrations, the quote standard thing is you really do have those, those phases that are logical steps to get you there. You're not going to flex as much on that because it just doesn't make sense. You skip one of those steps and then you end up, putting yourself at risk for a successful migration. So we're finding that it really is a mixture of kind of a waterfall. You have this phase and this phase and this phase that you don't do them all together
right
every sprint. You really need to be in a mindset of let's finish a certain amount of analysis. Let's finish a certain amount of planning. We need to finish the configuration and development. And then let's pilot this thing to prove out everything that we did leading up to that is working. And then let's go into production, guns loaded, doing this as fast as possible. Because as soon as you start that migration, now you've got 2 places where that content is. And the sooner we can get it all in that destination and be able to shut down the source,
yes,
the better off the organization is going to be in terms of being confused and disrupted.
Yes. Chris and I talked about Ludacris mode.
Yes.
We need to go into Ludacris mode.
It's all about Ludacris mode, yes. You got the special sauce for turning on the Ludacris.
I want to thank you today also for wearing cool socks again. You have outdone me.
How do you like that?
I know people can't see this, but
we're going to have a vlog so we can show the socks.
I think I need to take a picture of that and I'll put it up on the blog as I post it up. But man, that's pretty nice. He's got gray and blue and dark blue socks. Does that match your Scrum hat?
That's why I have multiple hats. Whatever color socks I have, I put on that hat.
I like it. Keep you met with somebody today as well.
I did.
That's
I actually met with 2 clients today.
That's great.
Very, very good morning.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Anything else we want to talk about with this?
You're ready to be done with process, aren't you?
No. You're like, I just got started, Danny. I'm about halfway through the subject. But so to wrap it up, Tommy, what do you?
No, I think kind of the lesson learned, and I'm working on the blog. We'll see when I get to that point. But I'm really just making sure that we're doing the right thing by applying Scrum to our migration projects, and it seems to fit. I think you have to put it in the right perspective and not make it agile from the perspective of it's just one big project.
Yeah.
And we can go in any direction.
Yep.
I think that works well for some app dev that we do. But when it comes to migrations, we need to have some discipline of these phases, and there's certain things that have to take place in those phases to be successful.
Good. That's great that we're taking the time to learn that. And I from an outsider, again, looking in on a couple of these projects, it's continuing to serve us flexibility wise as well.
Right. Yeah, that's what we want. We have the 3 C's,
Yes.
and I think having choice, we want that in every project that we do. We don't want someone to feel like I'm stuck. But we want to give them the right guidance and put in the guardrails, but give choice within those guardrails.
I like it. I'm whispering now. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm whispering. Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Sure, Danny.
It's a pleasure. Even when we were talking about process, it was a pleasure. I stayed awake for the whole thing. Good. I'm here. I'm right here with you. Thank you, everybody. You stuck with us too. Wow. All right. Way to go. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And definitely, if you're looking at migrating to Office 365, especially for folks who might be doing it from a platform like Jive or some other content platform, feel free to reach out to us. It's a topic we're pretty passionate about talking about. But just come to us through the website. Just go to the Contact Us page. That sends me an email, and we'll talk very soon about it. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.